topic number 3 says, does his view of the black and white world set realistic ideas of interactions with Europe and ultimately the world? Let's see. Oh, this clip. All right, I think I'm supposed to start this at a certain point here. Let me see. I think it's 3:14. Why is it not coming up? Okay. I think I'm supposed to start this at 3:14.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you fancy the odds, there is always a very good response for someone racially abusing you or calling you a nigger, and that's a punch in the face. I mean, I'm not trying to get you in trouble. If it's 10-on-1, maybe you might walk away, but if you feel pain, there's nothing wrong with responding adequately to that. There's a lot of sisters these days are doing MMA. You know, and everyone knows Ronda Rousey would take Floyd any day of the week. In fact, my Muay Thai coach is a woman, and she beats me up regularly. I would recommend the sisters take up some form of self-defense. I think anyone in any kind of remotely revolutionary movement should be practicing some form of self-defense because it can get like that. But B, I mean, with the word nigger, and I would just say nigger because when we say N-word, that's what you're thinking anyway, right? I mean, people act as if white people only started calling black people niggers once hip-hop got popular. Right. It's very strange. And I agree that rappers are held to complete double standards, of course. And even as someone who's critical of certain strains within hip-hop, I'm still defensive in the sense that when the narrative around critiquing hip-hop comes up, no one asks who owns hip-hop, who puts hip-hop on the radio. As Mos Def said, old white men is running this rap shit. Right. Some tall Israeli is running this rap shit. And his label took the song, for those who don't know, Mos Def made a song called The Rape's Over on the same beat that Jay-Z used for The Takeover. And they took it off his album without telling him his label. And then, of course, he couldn't get back into the US and all kinds of other stuff. So there's certain type of performed blackness, as Baldwin talks about, you know, a niggerized blackness that white society loves to consume and then pathologize at the same time. But it's for you. It's your version and your vision of blackness. So I think that on the other hand, though, I think Black America is in a particularly unique space in the sense that if you are a successful Black American artist, you wouldn't even be able to shit in white people's toilets if it wasn't for mass movements of black people. Yeah. So you kind of do owe your community in a very black and white way that isn't really applicable to many other places in the world.
True. What do you do?
Then you're going to live psychically with the scars of not responding. I'm saying my mum's 4'10" and her dad's about as racist as a human being could possibly be. And she spent her life rebelling against him and was punished very brutally for it often. Abuse of, and I'm not saying that means you should suffer abuse. I'm just saying the abuse of people by bullies is not new. And unfortunately with bullies, and this applies to globally what we're talking about, bullies only learn when they get their ass whipped. And if we look globally at the system of European hegemony, and America is its offshoot, and we look at how our government's kissing China's ass at the moment, now China's in the country, we can learn a thing or two about what happens. Power only respects power. And I would close on this, that I think for all the social movements we have, against white supremacy, against European colonialism, against patriarchy and all these other forms. We're talking about black lives specifically. There will always be racism as long as there are not black societies capable of militarily, politically, and economically defending the black population. And if we look historically at how white supremacy came to evolve, when the Portuguese and other Europeans first came to Africa, they were not racist, because they found black societies militarily, economically, and politically capable of defending themselves. The early parts of trade between Europeans and Africans were ivory, pepper, other forms of commodity, of which human beings were only a small part. If we look at the Greeks in ancient Egypt, they did not consider themselves superior to Africans because Africans were their teachers. If we look at the Spanish interaction with the Moors, they did not consider themselves superior to Moors because the people they were interacting with were not at a lower economic, political, and economic state. So unfortunately, I think we can only at best put a plaster over the wound of what is a bigger global conflict, and understanding the way in which the ideas or the ideology of white supremacy evolved in that catastrophic interaction between African and European civilization, I think will give us a better strategy in the long term of how we can develop or be part of a movement towards reducing the deficit between the West's ability to do violence to the rest of the world and not. The kind of abuses that used to happen to Chinese people in America when they couldn't vote, which did happen, when they were being lynched, which did happen, when they were used to build railroads, which did happen, are not going to happen today. Why? I've been to Chinatown and seen people cause trouble in London, and the police come and bust your head, not the Chinese people's head who are beating the guy up on the floor, drag the guy out and be like, what are you causing trouble for? there will not be an Africa town in London anytime soon because we don't command that level of respect. I'm not saying everything China does is perfect, by the way. What I'm saying is it's unfortunate humans seem incapable, at least at the highest levels of power, of respecting anything but equal capacity to do violence. Let's just look on who's on the UN Security Council. So we can plead and we can march and we can organize, but I think also we've got to be honest with ourselves. If we look at how countries in Africa got their independence, most of them got it by the gun. If we look at how transatlantic slavery ended, Haitian Revolution, Sam Sharp in Jamaica, and I'm not advocating violence. What I am saying is, I don't consider resistance violence, by the way. I'm not saying we need to be out in the streets burning stuff, but what I am saying is we have to situate ourselves within a realistic sense of this conflict. And I think fooling ourselves into believing we can embarrass the state into being nice. They're not even nice to working class white people. Incidentally, I will close on this point. You were mentioning about free school meals. Our government has just announced here they're going to take free school meals out of the schools in the UK. And that ain't just black kids who's going to be affected by that. As someone who grew up on free school meals, I'm a bit offended by that. So the violence that is happening, as what Baldwin says, as the world struggles to continue to be white, there is going to be more violence. How do people reconcile the idea that you're superior with, oh, my government is bowing to China when they come to England? How are you going to reconcile you're taught you're superior, but India has just sent a rocket to Mars for 10% of the cost that NASA did it while it's still a third world country? The world is no longer white, but it seems we haven't realized that and we haven't organized ourselves accordingly. And certainly our states are going to do the best to hide that from us. So I think we have to take a historical view also.
Interesting, man. You guys in the chat, how many of y'all are into Akala? I'll be curious to hear how many of you are into that, brother. He's a rapper out of the UK. I think he has Jamaican roots. I believe he has Jamaican roots as well. Gas him up. What say you to this, man?
I mean, I didn't hear anything that him, Umar, Claude Anderson, and all these other people, they've been saying this stuff for the last how many years now? It's nothing wrong, but it's nothing new. I mean, it's like we've been, what's that, the same old song, right? This is the song that never ends. We've been saying this stuff. Like, I don't know. I think, black intellectual spaces need to be revamped. There's nothing new there, in my opinion.
I agree with you on that, Gas. We are kind of just rethreading the same old for the last 20 to 30 years, I feel, personally. Forecast, what say you to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obvious, you know what I'm saying? And also, getting something that you can, having a bargaining chip, you know what I'm saying, which is, basically just controlling your own stuff. But, is about action, you know what I'm saying? It's about doing things and going out there to control your own neighborhoods, you know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, it's obvious, everything in nature does that, you know what I'm saying? It protects its own and it makes sure, you know what I'm saying, nothing comes to harm its children, you know what I'm saying? And that's just the way the world works, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, I just think that a lot of us have like a defeatist kind of mindset and like, if you can't beat it, kind of join it mindset. So ultimately, like we are really far away from this, you know what I'm saying? And the only way to get to it, I think, is, for something real bad that has to happen. But not that, you know what I'm saying, it hasn't happened before because, we do have a history of doing this, just not in the last like 60 years. So, you know what I'm saying? It's just a part of, you know what I'm saying, like, what are you doing out there on your, like, for yourself to build something? Because nobody really gonna listen to you until you actually accomplish something, you know what I'm saying, like actually accomplish goals. So like I would say, like, what are you out there doing, you know what I'm saying, like, as for each individual person who wants to see a change anyway. If you want to integrate, you know what I'm saying, whatever, but if you want to see a change, like, I will have to ask myself, what am I doing? So, I'll pass the mic.
I appreciate that, Forecast. I had asked in the chat during the video if the folks listening like Akala and Arthur's musician, street musician, Arthur's said yes. Marcus Garvey is the way he says, yes, Akala has a Jamaican dad. I like his speeches, not his rapping skills. I could feel you on that. I think the best flow to come out of the UK was Slick Rick, in my opinion. But let me throw it to a hip hop head.
Hey, he's from the Bronx.
Bakari.
He's from the Bronx.
One, do you like him?
Don't take him away from us. He's from the Bronx. I know the UK. He's a BX baby.
Right, Slick Rick, you're talking about, right?
Yeah, because y'all Brooklyn and y'all grab on the Biggie. So can we at least can we keep Slick Rick?
Go ahead. How about? But Bakari, you're a hip hop guy. So let me ask you first. Do you like rap out of the UK? Have you heard any of it?
That guy who was just rapping, the guy who was just talking, he's okay. I like I want to say his name Skrilla. You ever heard of Skrilla? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, y'all you hear Skrilla? I like Skrilla.
Yes.
Yeah, I like Lady LaSure. There's a few rappers from the UK that I like. And what is
So
he was from the UK. What's Slick Rick was from the UK, Gas.
Originally, yes, he's from the UK.
He's from the UK.
Then Biggie Smalls is Jamaican.
And I didn't like Slick Rick, by the way, but go ahead. I was not a Slick Rick. He was okay, to me. Okay. Well, do you want me to? Okay, about this about the prompt.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's a big delay, man. So you was about to ask me a question. I thought that was you was asking.
Go and come back. Go and come back, Brother Bakari. Go and come back in.
Well, okay. Can y'all can hear me now, right? Because I'm out and about, right? But
yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, but I think like when Gas said it's old, it's nothing new, but the truth ain't gonna change, right? And I think sometimes you have to keep telling the truth until people understand it. Because I don't think our people completely understand. See, for Gas, he may not need it, and for Koku, he may not need it. I might not need it, but there's a lot of our people that needs that truth he was telling. So when he was talking about slavery and everything that happened at the end of the gun, regardless of what people say about the civil rights movement, but was through guns and violence. Detroit, Chicago, LA, New York, they was busting people side the head. Then when you come down south, you will see where the farmers down south have started fighting back and having their enemies. So that story, the truth needs to be told. And the reason it needs to be told, because we're always told that only thing we ever done, even during the civil rights era, the only thing we ever did was take a butt whooping. And if we don't tell that truth, and if we don't get it out, our kids would think, what kind of men do we have? They never stood up and fought back. But when we can explain how any change that we ever got anywhere, because all around the world the same song, as Digital Underground would say. But any change that ever happened for us throughout the world was us understanding that we need to fight back. And now we got to understand it's not just fighting back. It's we have to understand, or we don't understand how violent all of our enemies are. All of them, I put plural enemies, because it ain't just the European folk, all of them, right? For me, my enemy, right? And if we don't understand how violent our enemies are and what they're willing to do to keep you in check and keep you afraid, we would never get out of it. We like to say our men shouldn't fight a woman, but they didn't have gooks didn't have a problem with their man coming out the back of that nail salon beating black women in that nail salon in New York. Didn't have a problem right here in Atlanta and right in front of some black man that Korean didn't have a problem slapping that teenage black girl in her face. So we got to understand that what they're willing to do to keep you in check, and that truth need to be told. And even when he was now can talk about when he said self-defense. I was a trainer. I trained boxing. I trained people. And when he was talking about and I know he cracked a joke about Ronda Rousey, but there's a lot of black women that's taking boxing. I can say around here anywhere, and I could be in an area, and it could be because I'm in an area where there's a lot of black people, but there's a lot of black women that was taking boxing and MMA, boxing, kickboxing, MMA, learning to protect themselves. Actually, more women doing that than men. It was more women training with weapons than black men. So he is correct about, and you do see a lot of them, but we all need to have that type of training. We all need to be willing to train, because if you're talking about fighting your way out of something, you just might have to fight your way out of it. And if you haven't trained to fight your way out of it, we get our ass kicked. And now you're the mic.
I guess Coco
No, I'm here.
is
I'm
on
here.
pause right now. So let me go. Okay.
Yeah. So, Buana, does Akala's view of the black and white world set realistic ideas of interactions with Europe and ultimately the world? Go ahead.
Ultimately, I think it's going to come to that. I think that the world is, well, the black world and a white world has been in a space where it's been a master slave relationship for a long time. That is slowly changing. And eventually, you know, for the black world to come into its own, they're going to have to approach the white as men, and we're going to have to just get down to business. We're going to have to fight. But there are several things that's happening. First, let me talk about Akala. Akala is a person that I consider to be the Goodwill Hunting. If anyone watched that movie, he's a Goodwill Hunting character. You know, he come from the bottoms, and it's just that he was a brilliant dude. And it's just that I guess he read a lot, whatever he did. He's educated himself in Saturday schools, and he was able to speak to the so-called white establishment in the UK in a way that not only that he was intellectual, but he was able to beat up a lot of people because of his intellectual prowess. You know, very bright young dude. And I think he's a good rapper too. Him and Low Key. That's another rapper out of the UK. Yeah, but I would say that as far as the fact that it's been heard before, what I say that I think that it has to be repeated. You know why? Because even though some of us know about it, it is not applied to the extent that it should be. You know, the philosophy and opinions of Gavi was written more than 80 years ago, probably more than 100 years ago now, and it's not really being applied. Why? Because, you know, we had integration. Now we get the cultists coming with the either Hebrew Israelite. We going all over the place with our ideologies, because we have not sat down and applied the things that these brothers were saying for hundreds of years. It's been little to no application, because many of us have in our minds that the white man ice is colder. That is in our mentality. And unless we have these ideas and principles that God we've been talking about from hundreds of years ago, unless we start to quote these things, get it in our mentality, as we do with John 3:16 or John 3:15, whatever it is, until we get it down into our souls and start applying it, it needs to be repeating until we get it. You know what I mean? And I don't think that the black folks have gotten it yet, or else they would have been acting like they have gotten it. And what we see is they acting in the opposite. They're acting in the opposite. They think the white man ice is cold, and we still playing that out. So it must be repeated. And I also say this too. If the product is not bad, why continue to reinvent it to create something new? You know, McDonald's is a recipe that's created more than 100 years ago. So does Kentucky and etc., etc., etc. They still reproducing that same recipe.
Coca-Cola.
Why? Because it's effective. It's doing what, yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do. And I think that, and also even in intelligentsia, they repeat the ideas and philosophies. Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations more than 100 years ago. More than 100 years ago, Adam Smith wrote The Wealth of Nations. And we still being tasked to read these ideas and philosophies. Therefore, I believe that our philosophies from our great thinkers should be repeated in the minds of our people, till to a point to where they have gotten it. Because you know why? Because our intelligentsia, the so-called black intelligentsia, whether it's in Africa or the Caribbean or in the Americas, they could quote great scholars, you know, economic scholars, political scholars, and or social theorists from out of Europe, but they can't quote one line out of the philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey, and he was one of the greatest in the 20th century. Why is that? Because we have not think that these things need to be reiterated over and over and over again until we not only have gotten it and could quote it like we do the Bible, but we actively start to apply it. Most of our people even can't quote Amos Wilson, and he just died what, 89 and 90s. You know what I mean? That's not, his ideas has not been applied yet. So I think that until the theory meets the application, it needs to be continuously applied, because many of our brothers could quote scholars from Europe, could eat recipes from out of Kentucky Fried Chicken, McDonald's, and things like that. These things have been done before, and they continuously do it over and over again. It's almost like a cycle and a loop, because we've applied these ideas and ideologies in our daily lives, but not the ideas and principles that I believe could forward our people. It's almost like we're working against ourselves. So I think that these things need to be repeated until it's applied, like almost like a holy text, almost like the holy scriptures, you know. But that's where I am with it. And I do believe that the ideas are a realistic one. I believe that eventually the black world and the white world will come to a place where we have to sit down and either fight it out like the Civil War back in the day, or, you know, we're gonna just part ways and say you go your way and I go my way. And that's what I believe about this particular prompt.
Yeah, untouchable. I think, I mean, of course, I think you and Bakari are correct in that the lessons need to be taught. But I think where Gas is, at least this is where I am, is I think we've repeated this shit too much now. I think it's we're talking about the happenstance of when theory becomes practice. I think it's time to end the happenstance talk, and it's time to start putting some of this shit to real practice. And I think that's the problem. Let me speak for myself, but I believe Gas is saying the same thing. I think that's really the problem. We keep talking about shit, and there's those of us who are here, and we there's those of us who claim that we wanna work on the change, but then, and I've noticed this myself personally doing this podcast and stuff, that when you really reach out to folks to actually do some shit, the folks ain't doing it. So you are left to repeat the things over and over. Let's do it. Go ahead.
That's true. Koku, you know that. Yes, I agree with you. You guys, y'all don't understand. As intellectual people, y'all are ahead of the curve. Y'all don't understand that, and I think that the intellectual class don't understand that they are way ahead. So it sounds like monotony to you. It sounds like monotony. It sounds like, I heard that before. But most people, up to more than 50%, you ask them who Marcus Garvey is, most of them wouldn't even know who he is, let alone Amos Wilson. They never heard about him before. They don't live in that world or that space.
I agree. Untouchable. I
think that it has to be repeated. It has to be.
Yeah, I think there's a bad delay here, but yeah, Untouchable, I agree. The thing is, though, I think I personally would like to replace repeating the lesson, and I would like to talk about, man, like Bakari has been talking about, man, how do we really get out here and and make this shit a reality, because that's the thing we really need to talk about. What we really need to be talking about and repeating now is, how do we navigate actually getting out in the streets, not getting your head sting off because you tell a black man to be accountable, right? How do we get out here and do that and then get right back to let's get the work done? You know, I think that's the conversation that we need to be having, as opposed to just repeating Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey, Marcus Garvey, Narere, Narere, Narere.
No, I agree. No, I agree.
Can I say
I agree.
something right
I
quick?
think that go ahead. Sorry, brother. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I'm sorry. It's a delay. I ain't know you was talking, but I apologize. But you know what? It's my brother, I absolutely believe in groups doing us working as a group. But in this case, in order to get the group going, you have to become an individual. You have to be the individual. Are you willing to tire yourself out, wear yourself out for it? I'm gonna be honest. I've been doing this my whole life. Like when people say the speech is old, I've been hearing it my whole life because I ain't have no choice. Ever since I've been old enough to remember stuff, the stuff that we're talking about, I have been hearing my whole life. I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of black people. I've seen black people do a lot of good stuff. But today, in this 21st century, you're going to have to become that radical individual for the group. You're going to have to be willing to go out and say, this what I think need to be done, or this is what need to be done. And you just going to have to do it. And hopefully along the way, somebody join you. Hopefully along the way, somebody join you. I've been doing my, I call it a Black Business Challenge now, but let's just say hypothetically, I've been doing this basically for the last, a Black Business Challenge, shit. Strictly just trying to find black businesses for the last 5-10 years. But you get out here on your own, then a lot of times you see it might just be you. And during that process, I've picked up maybe 10 people to ride along with me that understand. Some people get away because they truly believe in this wholehearted people of color, everybody the same nonsense. But you just gonna have to get out here. If we see it need to be done, we just gonna have to get out here and do it. I'm tired of people teaching our kids. They don't know, our children don't know nothing about themselves. So I saw a need, but we needed books. People donate to me. I started just going out there on my own. Then you look, now people donate to me. I'm not getting a lot of donations right now, but what I get, I'm grateful for. I'm going to pick up some books tomorrow. I went out there and I gave them because our kids need to know. Our children need to know that we're African. Our children need to know your dark skin ain't no curse. Your dark skin is beautiful. What they call naps, I call naturally curly, just tight curls. It's beautiful. Our children need to see we don't need to be looking for Superman. We need to have black superheroes. So I thought, you just going to have to become that radical individual, and hopefully some people come along with you, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to find. Go see, and the thing about it is, we're separated. You in New York, I'm in the Atlanta area, Bawana in the Bahamas, Forecast, Virginia, Gas, he say he traveling around the world trying to make babies. But we're separated.
And finding G spots of women.
Yeah, that's what I say. You making babies. So that's why. Well, we got to find some people close to us that want to do it, and that's what I've been trying to do, and I'm going to continue. So in this instance, it's okay for me anyway. This Isaac to be a radical individual, because you're being a radical individual trying to make change for the group, hoping the group get on board. I get it, Mike.
You know, I just want to. There's something in the chat I want to address directly because it's an interesting comment. Bakari, I'll tell you, you do the Mind Your Black Business segments of the Brother Bakari podcast, and you guys, all you guys listening to my voice should be tuning into that too. And you know what? Reach out to Bakari and suggest certain black businesses and stuff in your neck of the woods, and I'm sure he'll talk about it on his show. I'll tell Bakari something he might not know. I used to do the free business shout out weekly when I first started podcasting. In fact, D Webb started to do it after a while too. And I think he still does it where he shouts out Kepra L from Melanated Conscious Society. And I used to do this free business shout out. One of the things I noticed that really put a bad taste in my mouth about that, which is why I don't do it anymore, but not because I hate the idea of it, but I would notice that, I would do this free business shout out and stuff. And then I ask by chance, someone whose business I shouted out, what did you think of the episode? And this was especially true when I was doing the book club stuff with Carl Hezekiah. Shout out to Carl. Carl showed up on a community tab the other day. I commented to it and he hasn't commented back. I don't know what's going on with Carl, but yeah, I would ask them, what did you think of the show and stuff? And they'll be like, what? I didn't listen to the show. And I'm like, but I'm shouting out your shit every week and you won't patronize the episode, and listen to a good episode of a book review or something like that. So it kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. I'm not going to lie to you. But I just wanted to share that with you in case you didn't know. The other thing I want to comment to is Marcus McGee. Shout out to Marcus McGee. Marcus McGee has been coming around. He's one of those quiet listeners in the background. He's been coming around a while. And he says in the chat, he says, yeah, you guys are way ahead. He's responding to what Untouchable was saying. He said, because some people that I think are leading me in the right way, you guys trash. And then I have to figure what you guys, I guess the way you guys feel, or why you guys feel that way, LOL. And I want to ask Marcus, who's out there, thanks for being here, by the way. I want to ask Marcus, when we, I guess, quote unquote, trash certain people, and then you look to figure it out, do you find that what was said here on the panel is true or not? I'm very curious about that. I'm very, very curious to see, is this segment of the Bill Madison podcast, is this doing the thing that it's intended to do, right? So just give me a response to that. Any other comments from anyone on the panel?
Yeah, I'm going to say something controversial. I'm not a fan of repeating Garvey or any of those people. I think they were reacting to the times that they were in. And I'm going to double down. Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Gas. I'll quickly interject to something you said there that I wish people would understand about Garvey, for example. Now, Garvey is my hero. But Garvey was in a time where Garvey himself was riding on the back of buses. And he was talking to people who were riding on the back of buses. And so his message, which is still a good one, the reason why he had all that success was because he was dealing with people whose grandmother, great-grandmother at the time, right, were born on a plantation. Well, people who were enslaved, people were still alive, still at that time, who were enslaved. And were riding on the back of buses and dealing with Jim Crow. So Garvey is his success, in my opinion, is based on two things. He was saying the right thing, and he was saying it in the right time. So I just want to say that. You have the floor. Continue.
No, that's those are some of the nuances, right? And his message, of course, I think, again, for all Black people, everyone should have a healthy dose of Marcus Garvey within their bloodstreams and within their psyches, because he's very much needed, because we're at war. However, when we're talking about the economics of nations, if we're going to have a nation state, I'm not going to follow Marcus Garvey, because Marcus Garvey didn't create the nation state. The nation state was built off the backs of European philosophical ideologies. Right? You can trace it back to Machiavelli. You can trace it back to the idea of creating taxation, the idea of their naval expansion. So you can see the nation state. And this is where I'm saying that the Black model just runs into a brick wall, because the very thing that they want to have, which is a strong African nation state, well, the origin of the nation state comes from European underpinnings. So you can't use Marcus Garvey to run a nation state. in terms of the nuances. Now, the overall philosophy, yeah, you can say we want a Blackistan, right, or a Black in Nigeria, whatever you want to call it. Yes, you can use that for the overall ideology that there's a Black nation, black, black, black. Cool, that works. But when we're talking about, raising bonds, and we're talking about, financing debt or the building of municipalities, Marcus Garvey isn't going into those nuances. If we're going to have a Western nation state and call it with an African face or an African print to it, I can't use Marcus Garvey to run a nation state. So I think those are the problems that we run into. And then I just want to point out, or let me just say these two other points. So that's me. So I'm going to double down on that stance. It's not about quoting European philosophers. It's about studying European philosophers so you know enough of their system. So either you don't repeat it or you choose to repeat what you feel will not whitewash you. Almost everything that we absorb from them, we're not able to be selective, myself included, to say, hey, I don't want to absorb that because, no, that's not what I want. Quite often, and if you look at it either on Black YouTube, you have the Thomas Sowell, disciples, and they quite often they listen to Joe Rogan and what's the other guy's name? I forgot his name. He's the white guy, Jordan Peterson, and they listen to then you have the liberal side, and they have their philosophers that's the height as to what they'll engage with, and so it's like, dang, if you really scratch everybody deep enough, there's a white guy behind all of us, and that's a problem, right? So I'm just saying that let's not be afraid to engage with European philosophy. That doesn't mean we engage with it to become European. We engage with it to know the ingredients of their soup so we can cook our own soup separately. And so with the example of McDonald's, no, the recipe has changed. The way Ray Kroc built McDonald's and had it running in 1963 is not the same way that McDonald's is run today. It's a whole different machine. The Happy Meal, the children's toy place. Ray Kroc didn't create that. I don't even think he'd want that. These were all created in-house with a whole different brain trust. The Coca-Cola recipe is not the same recipe. They were putting cocaine and cola nuts. It was a medicine.
Well, minus the cocaine.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right? So allegedly they've told us they've minus the cocaine. Who knows? Maybe they've created some synthetic cocaine formula that numbs us up a certain way. We just don't know the effects. We'll never know. You understand what I'm saying? So this is what's going on here. So they change these things on a daily basis. It's not the same thing. I was just talking to somebody about that, and I haven't eaten make garbage in years, but I said, it's funny because the last time I had McDonald's, which was about 6-7 years ago, it doesn't taste the same as when I was a kid. I don't know. If people eat McDonald's regularly, does it taste the same? Maybe it does. Maybe my taste buds have changed. But I just wanted to also say something about Akala and move on. He said something in that. He said, Ronda Rousey, he's talking about women defending themselves, and he said something that was so racist he doesn't even realize. He said, Ronda Rousey, yeah, she could take on Floyd Mayweather. No, she can't. I did judo. I did judo and boxing. Ronda Rousey would get the living brace beat off of her.
I was pissed off at that.
Yeah, she's a small white girl. Yeah, don't get me wrong. If she fights an untrained man, and even with that said, I had the time to work in law enforcement as a correction officer. The women wasn't running gung ho to hold down no man. No matter how much training they got, they still asked for male backup. I only met out of 25, 2 that was willing to go there with a dude. 2. Most of them wasn't trying to do that. They understood when the thick got thick, and that man gave you that man energy. You could do all the moves in the dojo, in the ring. When a man used that grown man strength on you, it's a whole different ball game. Now, if you're not prepared to go there, Why would you, and he said it, and he's like, yeah, my female Muay Thai teacher, and that's just that female pandering. I just want to point that out there. But that was very racist to me, him saying that, and because they were saying that was a thing at one point a few years back, because they hate Floyd Mayweather, and I'm not the biggest Floyd fan. I don't like everything that he does or he says, but Conor McGregor has done 1,000 times worse than Floyd Mayweather. He's pretty much a Floyd Mayweather ripoff, but the media loves this white boy. He does no wrong. But Floyd Mayweather, he's never taken a beating, never taken a loss, made over $1 billion in his sport. They hate his guts. You understand what I'm saying? So he didn't even realize that nonsense he was saying was part of the racism. But, I'll stop there.
I agree with that.
Can I respond to some of that? Can I respond to some of that?
Give me a second, Bakari, because I got to get the forecast too, because he was next up. But give me a second just to respond to something here. Trigger Happy 262. I'm not tossing away Gavi. In fact, Gas didn't even say toss him away per se. Gas was just talking about the nation state wasn't designed, created by Gavi. I believe Gavi's ideologies are still very sound. What I'm saying is the acceptance of said ideologies. You have to look at the time. You know what I mean? You have to look at the time. When we wonder out loud nowadays, how was Gavi able to get all those millions of people and all those chapters all over the place? He didn't have the internet, this, that, and the other. Well, it was because he was talking to folks who was on the back of a bus too. He was talking to folks as well as himself, who was going around the back to drink water or take a shit or piss or something like that, right? In the Negroes only section. And all I'm saying is we have to be mindful of that environment, of that atmosphere and time. The ideology is still sound, in my opinion. Now, Gas brings up a good point about the nuances of, well, are you going to apply those ideologies in this nation state that these white boys in them carved up in the Berlin Conference? So that's the only thing I was saying about Gavi. I'm not saying to toss him away. In fact, like I said, I don't think Gas is saying toss him either, but it's about the nuance. Do you apply Gavi to the nation state that these white boys designed? With that said, quickly, Marcus McGee answered the question. He said, I just had to come to the realization that I was listening to Pan-Africans versus Black people who just wanted to make it better here in the U.S. I lean more to the Pan-African, though. And I appreciate that response. That right there, that makes me feel good about doing the show. I appreciate that response. Because I was like you, too, where I was kind of listening to and reading, Black nationalists in America, and I realized the limitation there. When you start to expand out to the continent and, to the Caribbean where I'm from, you start to learn about C.L.R. James and Walter Rodney and all this kind of stuff. You will change, or you ought to, kind of tailor your outlook when it comes to the consciousness space. Let me get forecast and then Bakari.
All right, I'll be real quick, Bakari. Because I kind of want to go back real quick to what Buwana was saying about being ahead or whatever. Because I do think, and I agree with y'all about keeping this message alive and saying it, because a lot of people are like have the mentality of like we got that lynch mob, what I'm saying, we all one race, or like kind of idolize other people, what I'm saying. And more of us would be quick to throw our own under the bus. And to be honest with you, I think this is a white ideology, what I'm saying. But I think that is, the one something, if we've been in this here, especially in America, we've been here for so long, what I'm saying, that if we're going to take anything, we should definitely take the self-defense and the violence part, what I'm saying, to defend ourselves. But when it comes to that, because even the people who we say that are ahead, what I'm saying, we can keep having groups, but it's difficult to have these groups because a lot of people do just talk, even if they know this stuff, what I'm saying, and very few people take action. And at this point, it's been so many people that's been like scamming or something. So when you like say something, like you also have to do something to show that, like, because at this point we actually have to like show and prove, what I'm saying now, like, but I'll stop right there. So Bakari, you go.
Bakari.
Okay. when we say we got to understand the times of who Garvey was talking to. The problem is we don't understand. We're in the same situation. What you think, because you can see, that's the problem. We don't think we're on the back of the bus no more, but we complain how nasty our communities is because they don't come through and pick up the trash. We still talking about how the banks won't give you loans. We're still talking about the exact same. We're going through the same stuff now, with the exception of, oh, I can go drink out of the white people water fountain. I can sit on the front of the bus. But everything else Garvey talked about, you're still going through it now. Because if you wouldn't, we wouldn't be talking about what we're going through. And everything we talk about what we're going through, and if you look at it, it is still going the exact same way. For me, I sound like to me, Gas say, throw Garvey away. He said, nah, I could be wrong. But, right? My thing is when we say Garvey's idea couldn't have an African nation state. Everything Garvey was talking about was Africans doing it for themselves. We clean our own streets. You understand? We can have our own tax. Everything he was talking about then, it's the same things that we need to do now. We need to learn to feed ourselves. The difference, the reason he was able to get 2 million then, because those people then knew and they understood, like you said, just coming from slavery. Some of them were born into slavery. Like I would say, my granddad was born at the end of Reconstruction. So they were able to get people because they understood. Due to the illusion of inclusion, Black people today don't understand. I study Europeans too, but I study them because I want to defeat my opponent. I study all them Asians, Arabs, Orientals, East Indians, is because I want to defeat my opponents. If I have to take something from them that they're using that's good, I will. But for me, the best system, and I still think it's a system that can work. It's amazing. The Vietnamese didn't throw it away at the end of the 60s during the Vietnam War. That's what they used Garveyism, and they used Marcus Garvey to motivate themselves. That's what they used so they could fight back. And the point that I'm making, look at our situation now and look at the situation then. Look at the people then who had an understanding of what they were going through, and look at the people now who think they have made it. We are proud to rush out and kill off our own race, marrying other women. That was something that Black people wasn't proud of back then. It wasn't accepted like it is today. We're okay to say, let's go spend our money, let's get Uber. But when I look around, damn, we really don't need Uber. If we came together, we could say we have our own cab company and we could take our people where they need to go. The other day on your community tab, you put something up, and I forget what it was about, Koku, but I put in there about us cleaning trash, us taking care of our communities.
Yeah, it was
but
John
if you just look at, and I talked about me owning a trash company. So if Dr. John Henry Clark, who said that, I don't know, because I forget, he was born in what, the 20s? He was born in the 20s. He died in the 90s. And the same thing is being said today. The only difference is the situation is not different. It's the people that's in the situation that's different, because the people today don't fully believe that they're in that situation. That's my take on it. I give the mic.
No, Bakari, again, I think, and again, this is why I love Shoot the Breeze. Iron sharpens iron. I realize my comment might have been a little bit too brief. I should have expanded. Yeah, we're in the same situation. We know that. Most of our people are under I think you used the term illusion of inclusion. Most of our people are under that. But we know we're still in Garvey's time. We have the same problems as was in Garvey's time. That's absolutely correct. But we know that. The majority of our people aren't really on that. They think we're beyond the segregated toilets and drinking fountains and all this type of stuff. So that's the issue. Those people, the point I'm making, the only point I was making, about Garvey, which I'm realistic about, is that he literally was talking to people who just had to go take a piss around the back. You know, that was still going on when what's the basketball player name? He died this year too. From the
Bill
Celtics.
Russell. Bill Russell.
Bill Russell, yeah. I mean, Bill Russell was a grown man in the 50s, couldn't eat in the same restaurants with the rest of his team, winning championships for Boston, right? They shit in his bed and all kind of shit like that. So I'm just saying that if you and I were to really go out here to the average person walking on the street, and we talk Garvey to them, they would kind of be like, what are you talking about? Unless they're already in the conscious movement. They'll be like, what are you talking about? My head is in the bubble. I'm out there. I could buy Jordans. I could compete, so to speak, at least in their minds, with pop culture, with white pop culture and all that kind of stuff. So those folks wouldn't get it as well as the folks who Garvey was talking to. So this is why we have a different rate of success, I would say, using the same Garveyism, right?
You know,
I think I want to say something, and then
you know what? I agree, Koku, with what you just said, right? And that's where we would become a failure, right? Because we know. See, Gaston already said he ain't got time. He ain't trying to show them. But since we know, right? And I know I always mess with Gas. Gas wasn't saying throw Garvey away. I already know that because he already said everybody needs a healthy dose of it. But if we know and we don't teach our people don't know, and that getting back to, we gonna have to let them know. Maybe we ain't got to use Marcus Garvey. Let's use somebody else who said something similar, who came after Marcus Garvey, right? Let's use somebody they might know. But we have to show our people that this illusion of inclusion is false. You understand what I'm saying? And if we don't show them, because you know, and I know, and in the chat know, and Bawana know, and Forecast know, and Gas know, we know, and we don't let our other people know what we're up against, we are failing our, because some of them ain't gonna want to know, and when they don't want to know, just keep it pushing. But the ones who want to know, who we can get, we are supposed to let them know. And I'm honest, said this 100 times. I think Gas is very smart, and Gas is too smart to know that he's too smart to know that he know he's supposed to be letting his people. He's supposed to let his people know. I'm supposed to let them know. Coco, we all supposed to, and that for me sometimes become. And I know it can be time. It can be extremely time. Trust me, it can be time. But it's still, we are supposed to let them know something, whatever it is we know that they don't know and what they don't understand. And that, for me, that's the issue. I get it, Mike.
I feel you on that. Untouchable, go ahead.
Yeah, so let me try to separate this. So the reason why I say that it's important to continuously reiterate our thinkers, our Black thinkers, whether it's in the West or Africa, is because certain things are applicable. When Harriet Tubman said that in her lifetime she freed about 1,000 slaves, and she said, I could have freed 1,000 more, but for they only knew that they were slaves. When we talk about the system of Garvey, or as far as the fact that he was talking about,
Harriet Tubman couldn't save 10 people today.
Okay, so
Harriet Tubman was possibly a British government agent and spy. That's not even her real name.
That's all right. Let me rock though. So when we talk about the system of Garvey, you know what I mean? I think that people think because we have left the agricultural plantation that we have actually left the plantation, which ain't true. Ain't true. The plantation provide. The plantation used to feed, clothe, and shelter their slaves. Not only that, they used to go from Kansas until Kansas. What do we do now? They give us they invent this thing. We going from the plantation to the corporation now. They switched the names of it. It used to be the big house. Now they call it, now it's the big corporation, where you go and wake up in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning and you work until in the afternoon or late into the afternoon, even in the evening. It's can't see until can't see. What do these things provide you? Food, clothes, and shelter, none of which none of us make. So how is that leaving the plantation system? And if we have not left the plantation, the applicability of the ideas of Garvey still holds true of trying to formulate and creating certain things for yourself. I agree with Gas when he says that you must study the ideology and ideas of your enemies. Absolutely agree with him. But I also would add that you should also take two notes. Study the thinkers, the people who experience things, people who see the cracks, people who see the openings, people who see the alternatives. I believe that we should read these things as well. I think that sometimes, guys, it would seem, say, flush these brothers down the toilet, these African thinkers, they know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? I wouldn't dismiss them. I would read them as well. That's what our only space of contention, as far as that goes. You know what I mean? And also lastly, and I want to be quick. Lastly, what is the alternative? Is the alternative practicing pan-Europeanism and just eating that for the rest of our lives, or just not speaking to no one about the alternative way that you could possibly exist in this world? You know what I mean? If we shut our mouths and the thinkers, the intellectual geniuses like Gas, like Koku, like the rest of the brothers, decide to say, man, I ain't trying to do that shit no more. What happens? What happens? You know what I mean? The world becomes, I feel like we'll go into darkness. You know what I mean? As if we in there right now. There must be a few people who are willing or able to break down all the things that they know better to the regular people, to maybe convince them to think and to act in a different way. You know what I mean? And if all of them decide to shut up their mouth one day and say, man, I going for mine, man, the hell with these N words, then what happens? What happens? Like we're in a situation where we have to do it, that we have no alternative. That's the position that fortunately, I would say, some brothers would say unfortunately, that we are put into, and we gotta do it. We gotta break down things for the brother like McGee, where he could maybe tell it to someone else, simplify it, where he could tell it to someone else. We have no other alternative. That's we are in.
I appreciate it, untouchable. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, some of us gotta, I guess, repeat the tale. Some of us have to be the griot that repeats the tale. But I think the majority of us need to graduate at some point and definitely actually do some work. And by the way, when I said Harriet Tubman wouldn't save 10 people, Harriet Tubman wouldn't even say, if Harriet Tubman came back and dealt with the descendants of the people she saved, she couldn't get 10 people. If Harriet Tubman walk here in Brooklyn right now, where people can eat Chinese food every day and do this and that and the third, she may get her head sting off here in Brooklyn talking that talk she was talking back in the day. You understand? So that's what I meant. Real quick, guys, I want to get this real quick from you guys before we go on to Shoot the Breeze topic number 4. What should we do with those European drawn borders and these European constructs of African nation states? What should we do? Let me start with Gas.
I don't think there's anything we can do for now. I think it's like we live with certain fictions. We tell our children there's 7 continents when Europe is not a continent.
Yeah.
Right. It's just
that the other day. Go ahead.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just weird, and so, but we have to live with these we have to live with it. You know, it's weird. Like, race is not real, but racism is very real, right? And people were lynched, people were sterilized. Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Fannie Lou Hammer, this sister was, they removed her womb, You know, this stuff is real. This racism is real. But what they're departing from is a fiction. They invented it. So I think to the best that we can, I think, looking at like so-called Nigeria, for example, yeah, we know there's a problem with what the white people did and what the Europeans did, but that's no excuse for a Nigerian leader to steal money and hide it over in the Swiss banks, or to hide the money in Europe and not build the roads and not do the right thing for your country. There's still no excuse. So I think we have to just do the best that we can with what we're given and live in the times that we're in, and put down the philosophical, um, you know, or the intellectual thought process as to what those who are coming after us can read and absorb and make whatever decision with the time that they're living in. Right. So that's I think that's all we can do. We just have to make the best do with what we have. And so that's why when I say Garvey, I wasn't saying Garvey or these people are not good, but I'm just saying that you know we have to understand and contextualize the time that they were in. Um, just look at, for example, medicine. There was years ago, if a person had any issue, they would inject mercury in your body, or they'd give you, cocaine as a balm, right, or heroin in a small dose, right. And I think they said Freud was taking doses of heroin, right. That was accepted scientific practice and medical practice, but now that's not the case. So I can't bring a doctor from the 1700s today and put him. He or she would be confused, but most likely he would be probably confused as to how medicine is practiced today. So I think that's what we have to do. We just have to live with the times that we're in as best as we can to be like Sankara said, Burkina Faso, upstanding men and women, hold ourselves to good standards with the times that we're in, but put things down on paper and orally in our traditions so that the generation coming after us can, you know, possibly live out the Wakanda that we all want to have.
All right, guys. Thanks for that. Bakari, what say you? Should we, what should we do with those lines drawn in Africa? Bakari, you there? Unmute your mic if you're there. All right. Maybe Bakari has a technical difficulty. Let's go to the forecast. Forecast. What should we do with those lines drawn by Europeans in Africa?
Well, I think the first thing we should do is stop saying, they're so powerful, is nothing that we could do. You know what I'm saying? Well, and also,
you,
huh?
They want to allow you. That's a common thing we hear people saying. But go ahead.
Yeah. It's a common kind of weak kind of term that a lot of people use when they think that they can't do anything. But I will say this though, stop expecting everything that's going to change tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like this system that has been built like over like hundreds of years, like throughout whatever trial and error. They have these conversations too. You know what I'm saying? It's not like they woke up one day and was like, oh, we need to do it. They took their time to, like, if you study, Germany and Hitler and them, like help come up with the bombs and stuff like that, you know what I'm saying, and NASA and all of that, you know what I'm saying. So like, I think that it's no border stopping me from talking to, just like I could talk to my brother from from another state. Like, there's no border stopping me from doing business with my brother Bawana. You know what I'm saying? Even though we live in another country, and it's really up to us whether we want to do business or whether we want to like kind of think worship other people or think other ways to do it, or if we like, maybe black people is good enough and we could do business with each other and have faith in each other. You know what I'm saying? The border doesn't stop you from doing that, you know what I'm saying, from reaching across and you know what I'm saying, working together. It's just that we have a lot of tribal divisions and internal beefs, and then a lot of self-hatred, you know what I'm saying, in our community. So you know what I'm saying, it seems pretty difficult. But if you build the business that you think should be built, you know what I'm saying, like that's what you as an individual can do and continue to pass the right mindset and, you know, not pass the trauma down. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, you can come across borders and build things for yourself. And then once you, you know, build the things that you need to build, you make your own rules and live life how you want to. You know what I'm saying? You don't necessarily have to, you know, bow down to everybody all the time. So, but yeah, but I got to get off of here though. You know what I'm saying?
I appreciate you coming through, Forecast. Thanks for your insight.
All right, bro.
All right, you guys make sure to check out and subscribe to the Forecast Radio on YouTube. One of the members of KWAZ Radio. Make sure to check out his platform. You know, Trigger Happy 262 in the chat says that's why Pan-Africanism is important, because a revolutionary supernatural organization can dictate conflict better within the continent. There's other things he said. You guys can check out comments in the chat. Marcus McGee said, I've never even seen a map made by an African that shows how they view it. That's interesting too. Did Bakari ever come back? If not, let's go to.
I'm back.
All right, Bakari. What should we do with those lines drawn by Europeans in Africa?
Erase them, and draw your own lines the way you want to draw them. But when we draw them, when we redraw our own lines, we have to start seeing ourselves as one. That's how this world has been taken in control. Groups of people see themselves the same, but we tend to hold on to our differences instead of holding on to the similarities. Even though I'm not saying there's not going to be differences, I'd be crazy to say that. But once we erase those lines and redraw them, we're going to have to look past the differences and hold on to the similarities to make sure the lines is never erased by another group of people and redrawn. That's my take. I hear that, Mike.
I appreciate it. Bueno, what say you?
I would possibly like how the Europeans do it and have a conversation to decide how would Africa would look like. Because if we were to use the so-called might makes right strategy, then what would happen is Nigeria would probably own the majority of the land space in Africa. Then after that, they would probably stop at South Africa because they have the military capability of defending themselves. And then they would stop at North Africa. So that might make right strategy wouldn't necessarily do. I would think that they would probably have to sit down. We would have to sit down and discuss how we would want to go about as far in terms of the leadership. Because in my view, I would want to brush out all of them African leaders, to be honest with you. I would want to brush all of them, and start all over again, and have inclusive of that, us in the West being a part of that landmass, if I had my way. But I know I'm not going to have my way. So I would just, to do it in a civil way, whatever you want to call it, what civil to mean, I would probably want to sit down at the table and try to discuss how we would want to go about seeing, in terms of the ethnic groups that exist, to see how we'd want to structure a new continental Africa, because the might make right strategy is going to lead to a lot of unfairness and inequalities, and unfairness exists in the world. That's just what it is. But I know that if we use the might make right strategy, as they did in the Berlin's conference, the people who would control Africa would probably be the majority would be Nigerians. I know Gas don't like to use that term, but and South Africans and then North Africans. And I don't think that would necessarily be workable. So I would just try to see if I could get some consensus going in terms of what Africa would look like.
All right. Last comment is Trigger Happy saying we need to study the Senegal and Gambia. They combined in the past before, but it failed. Why did it fail? Should be the question before we start combining countries. I mean, Nyerere joined two countries up. That's still going. So it's doable. I appreciate that. Good conversation. Great conversation on that prompt. But let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 4 for time's sake.